everyone, and welcome back to the Tank Encyclopedia channel. After the last two videos, I honestly felt an urgent need to get back into the realm of AAA gaming, and since I was itching for a shooter, we'll be reviewing Call of Duty, the original one, the game that started the legend. Call of Duty was published in 2003 by Activision, who were looking for a Medal of Honor killer, which is what they called this game for a while, and a destiny which the Call of Duty series would actually accomplish. It was the first game developed by Infinity Ward, a studio formed out of persons who had previously worked on the highly successful Medal of Honor Allied Assault. Now, in its time, Call of Duty was a critical and sales success, spawning the highly successful series that we know, love, and hate. However, how does it stack up today? Is it still worth a play, or is it just a painful trip down nostalgia lane? Call of Duty created a formula that has made the series a legend. It is a regular, run-of-the-mill arcade first-person shooter with well-tuned gameplay and a number of various sideshows thrown into the game for variation. Most of the game is centered around shooting your way through large numbers of German soldiers in order to accomplish certain objectives. You fight along with squads of friendly soldiers, which surprisingly was a big deal back then. Most first-person shooters before Call of Duty didn't really bother with this and just sent you out on lone wolf Rambo missions. Communication with friendly soldiers is non-existent, you can't issue orders or anything, and their effectiveness on the battlefield is dubious. They are a welcome addition from an atmosphere point of view, and to give the enemy something else to bloody shoot at. Another interesting thing that Call of Duty did back then, that is now common sense, is the iron sight mechanic, which allows you to aim through the gun's sights as you would in real life with a proper weapon. It's not much of a big deal nowadays, but just try playing an older shooter which does not have iron sights, it will make you fully appreciate the mechanic. However, I do have to stress the fact that all of the guns in the game are way too accurate when firing. I had absolutely no problems sniping with submachine guns. Reloading is extremely quick to the point there's almost no reason to ever switch to your sidearm. Honestly, in the way they handle, the guns seem to have little in common with their real-world counterparts. Also, I find it funny that it takes 3 SMG bullets to kill an enemy, or 2 buttstocks to the belly. Otherwise, Call of Duty is pretty regular, with running, gunning, and grenading enemies both in the defensive and in the offensive. There are some changes of pace in which you have to man enemy artillery pieces, grow through a high-speed chase, and even crew a tank for a period, and those are interesting breaks in the gameplay and keep everything dynamic. However, all of these sequences heavily stretch belief, with the player single-handedly manning 88mm flak guns, while trucks and cars are able to shrug off significant bullet damage easily, and the player has little problem maintaining aim even when the vehicles swerve like mad. This is the only Call of Duty that functions on a health bar mechanic. Bullets and explosions chip away at the health bar, which can be replenished with aid kits dotted all over the map. Both the density of the aid kits and the damage taken from each hit depends on the difficulty level, but it is not that hard to get through most of the game on veteran if you have a bit of FPS experience. The difficulties are quite well balanced, although the game varies significantly in the challenge it offers. Most missions will be quite easy, while the defensive missions, like the end of Pegasus Bridge and Pavlov's house, are nail-biting hard. The maps are quite well designed, even though a number of them feel quite walled in and corridor-like. There are some amazingly cinematographic moments, especially during the airborne landings and the crossing of the Volga. They are generally well thought out and match the setting and the story quite well, even though visually they have aged significantly. All in all, the gameplay of Call of Duty still works quite well. It mostly uses the same formula that made the Call of Duty series a success. However, realism got thrown out the door. I was very pleasantly surprised by the events illustrated in the first missions of the American and British campaigns, which cover the Battle for St. Mare Église, the Bricourt Manor Assault, and Pegasus Bridge. The missions feel interesting and alive and cover some very fascinating history. They give an excellent feeling and atmosphere to the game, and I was honestly left curious and wanting to learn more. However, the game then makes a U-turn, screw you history, we'll go single-handedly take on the bloody Tirpitz, and a couple of other things. Call of Duty basically got scared of its own good idea and ran back to the old tried and tested special operations formula. It feels completely random and immersion breaking. The Soviet campaign also starts amazingly, with the Battle of Stalingrad showcasing the desperation of the Soviets to get back to town, and probably one of the best opening scenes in the series. Until you realize they just copy-pasted half of the movie Enemy at the Gates for the Stalingrad sections. Honestly, they didn't even bother changing much. And it's not the only time the game does this. The Bricourt Manor mission is also entirely lifted from Band of Brothers. I do understand they wanted to go for a cinematic experience, but come on, this is just a complete ripoff. The game then continues to Warsaw, a full 2 years later, and without even bothering to explain how you got there or what happened between the missions. This is followed by a section where you, an infantryman, get handed over command of a tank. Because reasons, you know? It is utterly confusing and frankly just bloody lazy writing and script making. The game ends with one more mission from each side, meant to highlight the end of the war. However, only the battle for Berlin, with the lifting of the flag over the Reichstag, feels amazing. The other two are a bit meh. Also, don't expect these missions to be historically accurate. The designers just took some historic events or some movie scenes and bent them to their needs in order to make playable and enjoyable missions. But hey, at least they play well and are quite atmospheric. The dialogues are rather bad on the whole though, with pretty poorly written lines, some overly done patriotism, lame jokes, and a lot of shouted orders. In conclusion, Call of Duty has some amazing story moments, but the game feels afraid to actually stick to its guns. The whole story feels stitched together with no rhyme or reason. Also, half the story is simply stolen from famous movies or TV series of the time. There are a grand total of 4 tank models in the game, and there's something wrong with each one of them, besides the fact they are all amazingly ugly. After you drop into Normandy, you move a bit through the mission and you meet with this monstrosity. Activision just kit-bashed a mobile wagon with a Wirbelwind and called it a day. They didn't even do a good job at it. I could give them the benefit of a doubt and think that they tried to model the 2 cm Flakvierling auf Fahrgestell Panzerkampfwagen 4, which was a rejected prototype, but I won't because they clearly didn't do any noticeable amount of research. Also, why is the bloody gun mounted over the engine? I know the Germans liked their asses hot, but even so. Next up, Tiger Phobia. Almost everything the British and Americans meet is a bloody tiger. There are like 2 Panzer IVs in both the Western campaigns, along with around a dozen or more tigers. Oh, and the tigers have a distinct pleasure in strolling up to close quarters with little infantry support or right in front of a conveniently placed flak gun. The late type Panzer IV with Schürzen and the T-34-85 are probably the lightest offenders of the bunch, but even so, the question that has to be asked is, what are these late war vehicles doing in bloody Stalingrad? Not that it is the first weapon, that has nothing to do with the time period, there are also MP-44s in Stalingrad. Killing tanks is also surprisingly easy. It mostly consists of getting to the Panzerfaust conveniently placed 20 meters from the tank. Aim in the general direction, fire, and done. It doesn't matter what part of the tank you hit, from what angle or whatnot, it will always destroy the tank. An overly done alternative is to use a similarly conveniently placed flak gun, which you aim and reload yourself from the wrong side of the gun, and which conveniently kills both tanks and infantry like there's no tomorrow. Also, the flak gun is the only artillery piece visible in the whole game and serves as a stand-in for artillery guns as well. During the mission with Pavlov's house in Stalingrad, you also get the pleasure of firing the Soviet PTRS-41 anti-tank rifle. In real life, this was a semi-automatic weapon with quite low penetration and punishing recoil. In Call of Duty, it is a fully automatic eradication machine that can go through any part of a German Panzer IV in a couple of shots, and the bullets are also high explosive, excellent for killing infantry. How a 60-gram bullet can make a 25-ton tank jump back as if smacked with a wrecking ball is also beyond me. The section in which you control a T-34-85 tank is one of the highlights of the game, and there have been several occasions on which I replayed Call of Duty just for it. Compared to the tank games nowadays, it is nothing special, just a sort of simpler single-player world of tanks, but it was one of the few games in which you could control a tank back in the day. In the end, while I can get behind the rule of cool, the whole tank aspect of Call of Duty is horrendously poorly researched, with almost every ounce of history being traded for gameplay and saving on costs. The tutorial mission takes place at Camp Tokoa, the paratrooper training base in the United States, leaning strongly on Band of Brothers. It's short, it teaches you pretty much everything you need to know, it's a part of the story and does not feel like an awkward appendage of the game, like many other tutorials I've played. Also, I really liked how the tutorial forces you to watch some interesting informative signs. Since Call of Duty is just a run-of-the-mill shooter, there's nothing complicated about the tutorial, but it does an excellent job of getting you in the atmosphere of the game. Activision did a good job with it. The friendly AI was a very important feature of the game when it launched. However, nowadays it's not much to talk about and it is rather stupid and limited, which means that you'll have to do all the heavy lifting in the game. There is no way to communicate or coordinate with the friendly AI, which leads to plenty of occasions in which I lob a grenade into a room to clear it of enemies, just to have a friendly soldier run into the same room just a second later and getting blown to smithereens as a result. Fortunately, the game doesn't punish you for such friendly fire accidents, but still it feels bad shooting one of your own. The enemy AI isn't much smarter. Whenever they are in cover, the enemies always leave a good chunk of their heads out so you can shoot them. Their reaction times vary from inexistent to godlike, with some enemies killing you the instant you have showed your face, while others will remain oblivious even though you have shot all their friends and their dog. They also don't coordinate between themselves and don't act as a unit, just haphazardly running around. The AI is dumb by today's standards, and it doesn't bring much to the game except making your task of decimating the Wehrmacht far easier, and also that of killing your friendlies. The interface in Call of Duty is quite minimalistic, but the good kind of minimalistic. All the information you need is available on screen without eating up too much of the real estate, and it is really non-intrusive. One of my only complaints would be that the radar has managed to get me lost once or twice, but in most situations it works fine. Also, in the winter missions, the crosshairs are a bit hard to see at times. Unfortunately, the interface in the tank mission is not on par. The red tank health bar on the right is a huge eyesore, and the crosshairs simply has nothing to do with tank sights. You can get Call of Duty to work with modern 16:9 monitors and on higher resolution, but only by fiddling about with the code of the config file. And this is quite shitty, seeing as not only is this game still being sold, it is being sold at a very steep price. Would it have been so hard to fix this, Activision, you money-grubbing bastards? The graphics have aged substantially. Although it is not horrendous, the game still has its charm and its amazingly cinematic moments, but that comes just as much from the action and from the story. The models are quite low poly and the textures have aged, but they're done well enough that they can quite often be forgiven if you have a bit of a retro boner. The guns and the soldiers are probably some of the better looking assets, although the maps are also quite good looking and atmospheric due to the lighting and layout. If you're seriously into amazing graphics, a game from 2003 is definitely not for you, but Call of Duty still does okay due to the quality of the developer's work despite the age. Call of Duty has the audio philosophy that the best music for a World War II shooter is the staccato of a battle. The music is either completely missing or quite low-key for a good portion of the game, not intruding over the sounds of the battlefield. When it is used more noticeably, it is generally to emphasize an adrenaline-pumping, tense, or touching sequence, and the developers did an excellent job of integrating the music into the missions, using it to highlight the action. The music is classical with lots of cellos, violins, trumpets, flutes, and drums, and it sounds the part. The rest of the audio is similarly well made, although it is generally nothing to write home about. However, background sounds such as the water falling in the dam missions or the Stukas attacking when crossing the Volga are excellent, and the latter will put a bit of fear into you. If I'd have to complain about the audio though, it would probably be the tank sounds, which appear out of nowhere when the tank is spawned and don't seem to vary in intensity with distance, which is most observable in Pavlov's house. Also, the accents for the Soviet soldiers are all stereotypical and take out a good chunk of the immersion. The German ones are pretty good though. This thing still has a semi-active multiplayer. The official match finder still works most of the time, although it pulled a fast one on me and refused to work exactly when I wanted to review it. There is still a small number of players in multiplayer, although why in the world they still play is completely beyond me. All the servers are private and they are various levels of completely weird, although most of them are deathmatch or team matches. The gameplay isn't anything special, and close-range fights quickly devolve into jumping games in which everyone hopes their randomly aimed shot actually hits the mark. It can be fun, especially if you're playing with friends, but I honestly don't see why you'd play it too much. Oh, the servers are separate for each Call of Duty version. Steam automatically downloads 1.4, but there are far more servers for 1.0. if you deem it worth your time figuring out how to downgrade your install. So, is Call of Duty still worth it? I was about to give it a moderately positive review, then I saw the bloody price tag. Activision, how can you, with a fucking straight face, ask for $20 for a 16-year-old game? It doesn't even have the add-on included, that's another $20. Honestly, the game is still good and it has its amazing moments with solid gameplay, excellent atmosphere, and audio, if you can excuse its age-related flaws. However, it is in no way, shape, or form worth $20. If you can get it at a serious discount or through other means, then yes, do consider giving it a try. It has the Call of Duty formula that made this series a legend, even though the graphics aged and the history is mostly bullshit. And that's it for this video. Thank you for stopping by and watching. If you've enjoyed it, please click the subscribe and like buttons and leave us some feedback. We always love to hear from viewers. Also, please consider donating on our Patreon. The money gathered there is used for the amazing illustrations that we are regularly releasing along with new articles. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or Reddit. If you use Discord, there's a link to our community server in the description. Anyway, this was all for this video. I'm Luke, and until next time, keep us in your sights.